going to continue focusing on the spiritual body. We have worked through the physical body and the emotional body, the mental body, and now we are going to focus on your spiritual body and what that is. And today specifically is probably a year in the making. I came across this information. I was actually introduced to it by my own therapist, who was helping me look at some things. And there is this idea of stages of faith, and there are lots of kinds of stages of experience. There's the hero's journey, there's the fairy tale, there's the happily ever after. And so it only makes sense that there's an awakening or growing up into faith as well. And this is something that's been a difficult topic for so many people, especially as we kind of maneuver between religion and faith and spirituality and faith. And I would just say that both hold an opportunity for faith to exist. And something that's been important to me is that when we talk about the stages of faith, or when we talk about the word faith, this is different than a knowing. And sometimes we are expected to know or have we're becoming familiar with this idea of certainty. And certainty and faith are actually opposites. So it's okay to not be certain about something. That is the definition of faith. So I'm going to take a lot of what I've done, what I'm doing today. And by the way, I'm doing it a little differently. Normally I have so many notes written out and I know exactly what I'm going to say. But today I didn't, because I wanted to do this with a sense of faith, because in not knowing what I was going to say. But I created this sheet, this graphic, about a year ago maybe, and I've been waiting for the time to share it, and the time is now. So this will be available for you to download on my blog later this afternoon. But for now, we're just going to go over it. And I take this information from Dr. James Fowler's. He's the one that came up with the idea of stages of faith. But I have, like I always do, I have taken information and kind of made it my own. And because I think there was a part that was missing in my own opinion. So you can get this from The Psychology of Human Development and Quest for Meaning is where Dr. James Fowler is at. But quickly, in reference to this graphic, Alfred North Whitehead wrote that religion is the transition from faith to the void, or from God to the void, from God to the void, to God to the enemy, and from the God of the enemy to God the companion. Only with death of our previous image, so only the death of the void or the enemy, can we imagine a new and more adequate God. Each stage of faith, this is me talking, each stage of faith is necessary and beautiful. And each takes its courage to abide in and to leave behind. The very faith that created each stage that we are in is needed to progress out of it. As we honor our own stage and the stage of others, we can experience oneness or wholeness within all of them. And that is what we're really after, is that sense of peace and knowing of ourselves, that wholeness, that sense of peace within us. So going on to the stages, it looks like this. So stage one of faith development begins in our youth, or even our toddler. And stage one is commonly called the preschool stage. And this is where fantasy and reality intermix. Our most basic ideas about God, our faith story, are picked up from parents and society through one-word ideas or simple explanations. So that's when you point, there's the sun, there's the sky, there's Jesus, there's God. So usually it's just very simplified. A lot of songs are sung that are very simple to understand what faith is. And then stage 2 comes along, and we begin to understand the world a little more logically. And actually, we begin to relate to the stories that we are told by our belief system, and we believe them literally. So we start to separate between a fairy tale, which is, Mary had a little lamb. We know that's a story, and we start to take these stories from our faith tradition as literal and as real. And we can even view faith as a magical. We can see God as magical. We want him to, we learn that he can grant our wishes. In this stage, I've said so many times, there's the stage where when you're young and you've lost a toy, and then you pray and then you find it, and that is the magic of that stage. That is what that stage is for. And it's what we need. It's the progression that we need to go through. And in this stage, good and bad are very polarized. So you have the bad guys and you have the good guys. I remember my son, I don't know what age he was, but how old was he? But when he saw a policeman smoking a cigarette and had to decide what was happening between this good guy who was doing a bad thing. So that was something that catapulted him out of that state. I'll share with you an experience my daughter had that catapulted her out of this state. Living close by was a family, and there were 2 sisters, and one sister accidentally found the family gun and accidentally shot the other sister, and she died. And I remember driving with my daughter. She had to have been 9, 10, and her really struggling with this idea because killing someone was so bad, right? But she could see through moving into stage 3 that there were some complexities there. In fact, I think she jumped a couple stages ahead because she taught me a lesson. And we had this beautiful conversation about maybe what we're really here to do and what we're really here to learn. Because if it's just about right and wrong, that gets really messy really quickly, because her little sweetheart knew that this little girl was not bad, even though she had done what we would consider the worst thing in the world. So we often have these little moments that push us out of these stages, or at least give us a glimpse into the next stage. And there are some adults that stay in stage 2, that there is a very concrete right and wrong. And that's where they prefer to stay, and that's where they feel comfortable. But if we can push ourselves a little more, we move to stage 3. And we usually adopt the beliefs we are taught through spiritual experiences. We start to have our own experiences that identify and look like the ones we've been being taught about for our whole lives. And we accept usually in this stage, you accept your belief system as the only truth. And sometimes this is hard for people to hear, because when we believe it feels so true. But when you can see that's something that I learned in these stages of faith, is that everybody goes through this stage. So if everybody's thinking that they are the only true, then maybe true is big. That's all I can say. Maybe it's really big. So often we have these beliefs, which, we'll say, we call them, they're inside the box. So we have these truths, or these parameters within our faith that are very defined and really well thought out and meticulous. And they call it a box because you can check the boxes. They become a box that you can check off. This is how I know I'm doing a good thing, so I do it. And at this stage, the authority within the faith is usually outside of yourself, And it's really usually given over to leaders and mentors. We usually look outside of ourselves for validation. And I think it makes sense because we're receiving that feedback back because they're telling us here's what could happen. And then, like I said before, we are starting to have those experiences for ourselves. So it makes sense to keep asking and keep wondering and keep having them tell us more what comes next. So a lot of people stay here in this stage of faith. And it works. It can work for your whole life. It works. And this is where I kind of shift off from Dr. Fowler, because I think in this moment, before we can move on to stage 4, there usually is what I would call a heartache. And the way I described it is heartaches can come in many forms. It is a life challenge or a wound. It seems to arrive perpendicular to what was expected. Heartache, though, is a catalyst to move forward if we choose to. Or, this is a pivotal moment, if we choose to identify with that heartache, it can halt us from moving forward. And so we kind of come to a cross on the road. In fact, I was having an amazing conversation with William Paul Young. He wrote The Shack. If you can watch the movie, I highly recommend that movie or the book. But he explained it like this. He says, we're moving forward in life, we're heading forward, and then something comes across, and it just seems to cut it. It seems to go at the very, hit us at the very crux of what our meaning is, and that is the symbol of the cross. And so ever since then, I've been very humbled and very open to the symbol of the cross, because I think that what happens to us. Something cuts us off almost in mid-sentence, and we really need to have courage and compassion. They are equally critical here. We need to have courage, because because there isn't a possibility that these heartaches can stop us, can keep us where we're at. It's hard to have a heartache, but we also need to have compassion, because it is hard to move forward. And we've all have people in our lives who we do just want to say, snap out of it. That's much harder to do, and we need compassion for that. But with this heartache, with this seemingly awful thing that has come in, I've always met everybody that I've met that has a heartache. A little bit down the road, it starts to become a huge catalyst in their life. And so stage 4 comes along, and we actually see the boxes. So we see those boxes. We realize that checking those boxes off isn't the whole point of things. That isn't the universal point. And if you're in the other stages, that's going to sound really uncomfortable. But in stage 4, we start to see the boxes we have created, and we start to think more critically as we examine our beliefs. We start to criticize, we start to wonder, we start to contrast our beliefs, or those boxes especially, with others' boxes, and we begin to see that maybe that police officer, maybe he's not a bad guy. Maybe that's something that's within me and not out there as a full truth for everybody. Maybe there's a different way of looking at life. In this place, feelings of delusion usually arise, and they can get, and those delusions, or that feeling of disillusion, not delusions, disillusion, that is very uncomfortable, very unstabling, painful in the body, I would say. The physical body holds pain. The emotional body, there is very little joy, happiness, and peace in that disillusion. And the mental body usually races with thoughts trying to stop the pain and stop those difficult emotions. So we're in kind of a crisis here. And because of that, it's easy to get stuck there because our mind just wants to find a solution. It just wants to find a solution to the pain and to the anguish. And sometimes it does. And sometimes it even if it thinks it does, I should say, it just keeps us spinning in another direction. So now our mind's spinning over with something else. And it's a really difficult place to be. And we need to support and love those that may be going through that stage. So one thing that's important about stage 4 is that people in stage 3, like I said, they think that stage 4 people have fallen. When in reality, actually their faith has moved forward. But to a stage 3 and 4 with that heartache in between, it's a big gulf. That's one of the reasons why I think it's there, because until you have that heartache and you don't identify it and you're willing to look at everything, maybe you're desperate enough, you look at everything, then you might look at that person in stage 4 and you might think that they are fallen or something's wrong. And that's good. That's normal, I guess. It's one way to look at it that way, because then it kind of takes the edge off the judgment, because that's just part of that stage. Maybe that's why I include that. But stage 4 is a critical point, because we've moved ahead of the game to where we can allow ourselves to be at one with a bigger community. But we also have we also might pull ourselves away from community and feel like we don't belong. And you know what? Sometimes both are true at the same time. But if we can hold on, there's stage 5. Stage 5 is not the end, but stage 5 is when the fight for certainty ends. And we see and accept life's paradoxes. And in this stage, you can begin to look at stage 3 people and have compassion and let them live their journey. And usually in stage 5, this is really interesting. He says, this is directly from Dr. James Fowler, he says usually in stage 5, that disillusion kind of settles, and we often return to our original stories and practices and symbols. But we have become our own authority, getting our own personal understanding of things, allowing that personal understanding to be and to give us the answers for us. So it's almost like we've flipped onto the other side of a coin, and now we have a depth. Now we have more worth, right? Because we have both sides. And most likely this kind of stage 5 happens in midlife. It's something that typically happens in midlife. So depending on when the other stages happen, it could be a long time, it could be a short time. But it's the time to me when we get that deep breath, when the pain has started to settle down, when our mind has started to stop looking for getting rid of those pain and anguish, and we feel it and we can be with it. And then stage 6 is what he has as the final stage. And he says that few people get here, and those who do live their lives in peace and in the service of others without real worries or doubts. They accept their own divinity and the divinity of everyone else and within everything. And some words for this are enlightenment, conversion, and grace. When we truly are enlightened or converted, completely changed, or full of grace, then to me, there's a love for all of mankind. Like he says, their divinity, we accept the divinity in others. We also accept it in ourselves. We don't give away what we don't have. And we have a sense of real live peace and contentment in ourselves and with others. And there's a few people that you can think of that really have this, they just don't seem to be upset and about things. And in my mind, I always think of, this aged couple, and they're sitting on their front porch and they're rocking in their rocking chair, and they've just been through everything in their lives. They've been through famine, they've been through wealth, they've been through sickness, they've been through everything, and so the things that come just don't rattle them anymore. And in one way it's sad because they've just gotten so used to the roller coaster that it doesn't seem to jolt them anymore. But two, it's also so beautiful because they accept, and because they've earned that right. They have been up and they have been down, and they know that the ups are not as big as we anticipate them to be, and that the downs don't take us out. And so they're just in this place of calm. And, usually it's that grandpa or grandma who, you as a parent or as a child comes to them with some big problem, and they just don't seem to jump in with the stress about it. They don't seem to get excited and their emotions don't get high. They just know that it's going to be okay. So think about people in your life that seem to just have that inner peace. They seem to be able to accept and love others, and the difference doesn't send any pain or anguish inside of them. I don't know, I don't know if we go through these stages actually just numerically. I don't know if different parts of our lives go through these stages, because even though it's called stages of faith, I think faith in ourselves, faith in our abilities, faith in a kind, loving God and universe, like all of those might have their own stages that they have to go through. This process, I think, is more than just a religious one. I think it's a journey, and I think it's good to have a journey. I think that a journey, when I think of a journey, I think of learning something, growing in a way, getting to the end of the journey a different person than I was at the beginning. And my spiritual body loves faith. Your spiritual body does not like a box very much, maybe unless you're in stage 3. But in this, the essence of who we are, I think, is so big and so grand that faith is the only thing that feels comfortable, because there's never an end to its growth and its expansion. It's not tied up into a small little box. And I'll share this one last thing. There was things that I would experience as a young child, and I didn't know that they were special in any way. I didn't know that it was unique. But I have these moments, and one of the moments I'll share with you is, it's simple. I'm going to tell you, and it's not going to sound special at all to you, but it was so enlightening to me. And if I had the vocabulary, I could maybe begin to describe what it changed for me. But I was young. I was probably 10, 11, 12. I know I wasn't driving yet. But I remember having this download of information. And it was like all that I would learn here in this life was like a box, a square, right? A square. And it would look like a square. And then as I would progress and have more knowledge, it would maybe take on a shape of a cube. And what that meant to me was that it would be familiar. It wouldn't be something I had never thought of before. It would be almost just a shift in perspective, and all of a sudden you've got a cube. And so a cube has a square. It's part of a square. Like I say, it's familiar, but there was so much depth to it, things that I couldn't possibly understand in my stages here. And then as an adult, I was pondering that one day, and this is really strange, but I realized that in a cube, if I actually had a cube here, I actually have sides of that cube, and each side of that cube is almost its own shape. And yes, it's square looking, but the depth is a little different, and it has its own. And then I looked at the depth of what made up that square, and the atoms and whatever molecules that made up of that, and how they are their own little cube or sphere, but they are so important. All of them are important to the whole. All of them are a reflection of the whole, but they are not the whole. And so they are both it and part of it, and their own and part of the bigger, all at the same time. I love, it's like a fractal. I don't know if you know what fractals are, but look them up. That is my understanding of our understanding, or what we will know. What is certain is that there's a never-ending up and down of growth, and that, to me, is the definition of faith, because we don't know which one's up and which one's down, so it becomes the perfect paradox of faith and certainty at the same time. So I will leave you this time. I will again have this on my blog, and the michellewingle.com. It's the blog/blog, and you can download this graphic, and I hope it's helpful for you. So we will see you next time.